Welcome to this, the third video in a short video series developed for school leaders. The focus of this video is evaluation. The series has been developed by Education Scotland's Attainment Advisor team and is intended to provide key messages, provoke thought, and act as a starting point for further exploration, discussion or development within this area. My name is Amanda Hamilton and I'll be leading you through this video. This short video aims to consider the purposes of evaluation, the importance of evaluating interventions and approaches in closing the poverty-related attainment gap, developing a culture of evaluation and learning, and approaches to evaluation. Before we proceed, you may wish to pause the video here and consider why you think evaluation is important. Why evaluate? Evaluation equals learning and is most effective when it is part of the cycle of planning and implementation. Planning and implementation were considered in the previous two videos in this series. In terms of the approaches we adopt to close the poverty-related attainment gap, evaluation allows us to learn and make changes in a timely manner. It supports us to make best use of our resources for maximum impact, and this is a key feature of a learning culture. The recently published document, Pupil Equity Funding, Looking Inwards, Outwards, Forwards, reports on effective practice across Scotland. This sketch note highlights the central importance of maximising the impact of pupil equity funding in improving outcomes for children and young people affected by poverty. Evaluating our practice robustly can support this. The document states that in the best examples of planning and reporting guidance provided by local authorities, head teachers are encouraged to clarify the poverty-related gaps they are aiming to address, ensure that the actions they plan to implement are evidence-based, ensure they have clearly defined outcomes and measures to evaluate impact, and to explicitly report on the impact on outcomes for learners affected by poverty. Reflection and evaluation throughout an intervention can be aided by reviewing data and evidence and asking, what did we expect to happen? What did happen? Were there unintended consequences? What was the best thing about this change, the worst? What might we do next? Ultimately, did we achieve our planned outcomes? If yes, why? If no, why not? What did we learn? What knowledge has been developed and how can we use this? Too often, people avoid reflecting on failure. Remember that teams often learn very important lessons from a failed approach. When evaluating the interventions and approaches implemented to close the poverty-related attainment gap, be prepared to adopt, where we can say this is working and we need to keep doing this and or potentially do more. We have a strong evidence base which will allow us to share our story of success and to bring others on board. We have the confidence to increase the spread and scale of this approach. Or amend, where we observe that parts of this approach are bringing about our desired change. We need to reconsider where we don't have the desired change and what we can do to improve this. Or abandon, where there is clear evidence that this is not working and perhaps causing more harm than good, then we need to have the courage to abandon. Continuing with an approach that brings no benefit can be costly in terms of resource, the support of the team, and most importantly to the outcomes of our learners. You may wish to pause the video again here and consider which approaches do we currently use to evaluate our interventions to close the poverty-related attainment gap. Our approaches to evaluation should tell us how well was the intervention planned and implemented? How effective was it in bringing about intended outcomes? This requires us to know at the outset what our outcomes are. What do we need to do next? To do this, we need to analyse the data and evidence that we collect, observe the interventions, and listen to those who are implementing, and most importantly, to the learners. By being consistent in this approach, we promote a culture of learning and can be responsive to what works in closing the poverty-related attainment gap. Higgins 4 states, triangulation is the process used to ensure evaluative statements about strengths and aspects for development are grounded in a robust evidence base. The triangulation of evidence-based information and data, people's views and direct observation of practice should involve all staff, learners, partners and other stakeholders. During the planned intervention, you will gather quantitative data as planned in your measures. Effective evaluation includes rigorous interrogation of this data by staff who are data literate and use the data to recognise emerging issues. Those staff, pupils, parents, carers, partners and other stakeholders who are involved in the intervention should have opportunities to share their views. Examples of how people's views can be gathered include through surveys, focus groups, ongoing professional dialogue, learning visits and minutes of team meetings. Direct observations of the intervention can take place during learning. Observations should be linked to agreed criteria and a shared understanding of their purpose. All stakeholders, including staff, learners, parents and partners, can engage in these structured observations and give feedback to support evaluation. Evaluation and reporting. When reporting, consider the audience and the purpose of the report. Is this report for senior leaders, stakeholders, peers? What does this learning mean for them? Which evidence and learning do we need to present to tell our story? There is often a tendency to report on the activity in such reports, but consider how to evidence the impact of approaches and interventions in a clear and succinct manner. This framework may be useful for reporting and can be adapted depending on purpose and audience. Provide a brief context by setting the scene. There's no need for extensive detail here, just enough to give the reader the key points. Then be clear about the specific challenge. Which gap had been identified? What were the barriers to progress that existed? What was your aim? Next, provide the reader with details of the intervention. What change did you introduce? What made you believe that this was the right approach? Then share the results. This could be in the form of data, observations or quotes from those involved. Be clear about what you saw changing throughout the intervention. Which data and evidence can you present to tell a compelling story? And finally, what was the difference made? What was the impact of your intervention? Reflect back to the challenge. What, if any, improvement has your change brought? Did you achieve your aim? What did you learn in the process, and what will you do next? Be prepared to share the failures and the learning this resulted in. In an evaluative report, the data and evidence will win over heads, while the story of the difference this has made to children and young people will win hearts. Finally, celebrate and share your success on any and every appropriate forum. Small wins are still wins, and other people will benefit from your learning. This again contributes to the culture of learning. At the end of this session, you may wish to pause the video here and consider how will you plan for the ongoing evaluation of your interventions to close the poverty-related attainment gap. Thank you for watching the evaluation short video. We hope that you found it useful.